And now we're joined on the nightcap by Brandon Scoop B Robinson. Find him on Twitter at Scoop B. He's an NBA writer and insider for Bally Sports. Scoop B, welcome to the show.
Brother, thank you for having me. I feel like we're like a family. Every other week, we're talking basketball, action-packed moves and grooves. So always a pleasure to be here, even on a Friday night.
Yeah, we'll start with the NBA game tonight. Well, actually, we will start with the exhibition that was put on tonight by the Milwaukee Bucks. I won't even call that a game because after the first quarter, it was non-competitive at best. Isn't this what everybody thought this Milwaukee Bucks Atlanta Hawks series was going to look like? An absolute, one-sided affair.
Not necessarily. In all honesty, I thought that this is what folks would have imagined. Knicks Hawks would have been in round one, and even what Hawks Sixers would have been in the semis. And I look at this as one game. I do think that when you look at game one between the Bucks and the Hawks, it definitely was a Trae Young affair, and I think in this one, Giannis stepped up big, but it was the collaborative effort of not just Giannis, but also Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, and even OG Bobby Portis. I don't know if I thought this is what people thought. I didn't expect it to be like this on a Friday night.
Yeah, that was an absolute destruction. Now to move on, because that there's not a whole lot to talk about that game at all. But besides, who do you think? How do you think the rest of this series shakes out?
I still think it's going to go 6 games. I just think that I think it was an off night for the Hawks. I do think that there was a high off of game one. I think sometimes, in my personal opinion, I think sometimes people get enamored with guys like Trae Young, guys like Steph Curry, and sometimes don't look for flaws in their game. I think that I like Trae Young quite a bit, but I also think that when you look at blowouts like that, I think people just thought it was a foregone conclusion that the Hawks were just going to come in and take care of business. I mean, really and truly, this is a Bucks team who, in game one, was coming off of going 7 games against a Nets team and going into overtime. I mean, this is a Bucks team that nobody thought would get to this point. And did you really think that they were just going to get down and lay down in game 2 against the Hawks? I think they got their win back, if anything. I think this is a situation where I think game 1 is always a fill-out game. And I think you kind of saw it in the other series between the Clippers and the Suns, where the Clippers had to get their thoughts and things together, and you saw them come alive in Game 3. So I think everybody fills out games differently. I think that the Bucks are now in their second win and able to kind of decipher the mistakes they made in Game 1 after being tired from the previous series against the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, that was no easy task. So I think it's still going to go 6 or 7 games. And I think that it's going to be an interesting series to watch. I'm excited to see how the rest of the series plays out.
Yeah, I am too. And but there's a lot of news going on in the association, but besides the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference Finals right now, like there's a bunch of head coaching vacancies being filled. We already know that Udoka's getting the job in Boston, and now we've heard that Jason Kidd is getting the job with the team that he won a championship with the Dallas Mavericks. Were you surprised by this hire, or do you think that this is, Mark Cuban wanting to hire a good coach, but also somebody he knows and has a good relationship with as well?
No, I wasn't surprised with the hiring. I knew about it maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Oh wow. So how did so so that means that you knew that Carlisle was on the way out. Like what was the actual impetus behind Rick Carlisle leaving?
I got a call like 3 weeks ago from somebody who said to me, it was a Friday. It was like 2 days before Game 7 between the Mavericks and the Clippers. And someone called me that night, and that was the same night that Damian Lillard had made mention to Chris Haynes that, he wanted Jason Kidd to become the next head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers. And that was the same night that the Blazers fired Terry Stotts. And the person who called me said to me that if the Dallas Mavericks lose to the Clippers in the first round, that it's a good chance that Carlisle is gone. And they shared with me that Luka Doncic doesn't really care with Carlisle. And then that article came out last week in The Athletic about all of the turmoil within the Mavericks front office as it related to just all of the things that were going on throughout the course of the season. And, I had kind of heard that was a thing with Carlisle. I'm in a new role, a new job. I kind of pick and choose my spots. But what I'll tell you is, when I heard it, that night when I got the call, the person who called me said, don't be surprised if the Mavericks hire Jason Kidd. So if you go back to my old tweets, like when I think it was like Kendrick Perkins was on ESPN with Rachel Nichols and Richard Jefferson, I quote tweeted what he was saying, and I said, don't be surprised if Carlisle leaves, and I'm paraphrasing, Jason Kidd becomes, a head coaching candidate that the Mavericks consider. So then, you fast forward to last week, all that stuff was going on, that article in The Athletic. I called Mark Cuban and, asked him what he thought of the article, and, he shared it with me, so I wrote about it. I feel like that whole Mavericks turmoil and what was going on kind of instinctively just put two and two together. I was like, yeah, I think the person who called me was right. And then, Carlisle ended up leaving. And then you saw yesterday he endorsed Jason Kidd for the head coaching job. I can tell you that, folks that I've spoken to that they're in the know, they told me that Dirk Nowitzki was very instrumental in, recommending Jason Kidd, and that, he advocated for him heavily on his behalf. And I also know that, J.J. Barea and Jason Terry are folks that Jason Kidd will consider in his assistant coaching on a bench. So I hope that my guy Darryl Armstrong, who I've known for a long time, I hope he can still stay on that staff. He's a fan favorite in Dallas. I hope that my guy Shamgod, New York City legend, can still stay on that bench. But yeah, I kind of did know about a few weeks ago that Jason Kidd would likely become the head coach of the Dallas Mavericks, and that was assuming Rick Carlisle was either left, stepped down, or let go. And as you all know now, he's the head coach of the Indiana Pacers.
See, does this solve whatever Luka Doncic's problem was with Don Nelson and Rick Carlisle being gone?
It depends on who you ask. I think that the situation in Dallas is, I think I like Mark. Mark is the type of guy who, to me, the Mavs, like the Lakers, like the Yankees, they hire people that are familiar or in the know. So, Don Nelson is son of Don Nelson, former Mavs coach. Michael Finley, former Mavs, has been part of the Mavs family for a long time. He gets elevated, I think, I know there's talk that he's vice president of basketball operations. There's talk that he could be president of basketball operations. And then you look at what Mark Cuban did with Dirk Nowitzki, hiring him as a special advisor, within the Mavs organization. I'll say this. I think, to go with my point about hiring from within, it seems like even though he let Don Nelson go and that he let Carlisle go, Carlisle still recommended Jason Kidd because they won a championship together in 2011. And so I think the benefit of Jason Kidd as the head coach of the Dallas Mavericks is he's familiar with Dallas, having had two stints with the Mavs, being drafted by the Mavs and then finding his way back and winning a championship. And I know that when Jason ended up leaving Dallas in free agency some years ago and signing with the New York Knicks, I know for a while Jay Kidd and Mark Cuban were kind of not on the same page, but they've since patched up that relationship. They have a good rapport. As it relates to Luka Doncic and Jason Kidd, I do think that there are things that are similar between both players. When you look at the type of player that Jason Kidd is at 6'4", many people compared him to guys like Magic Johnson, and then even you look at guys like in the 80s, like Fat Lever. People often say that, he was Jason Kidd before Jason Kidd. And some people will say, Jay Kidd was fat, not the next Fat Lever. But I think when you look at Luka Doncic, I think he's a cross between LeBron James and Jason Kidd, his style of play. I think Luka's a better scorer than Jason Kidd. And I think more than anything else, Jason Kidd's experience, I think, will benefit Luka Doncic just as a sounding board, as a mentor. I don't think he can improve. I don't think Luka's arrived, but I think he's arrived, if that makes sense. He just doesn't have the hardware that Jason Kidd has, but I think he's a complete player. I think they're similar. I think not just their basketball IQ, but their basketball EQ is so similar. And I just think that their temperaments are going to work. Now, Jason Kidd's the head coach. You still got to bring in some more talent to benefit Dallas. And I think that playing Luka in Dallas' system, I'd like to see him move off the ball quite a bit, move him over at times to the 3 spot and have a dominant point guard playing alongside of him. But I don't think Jason Kidd's coming out of retirement to do that anytime soon.
No.
But I think that where Jay Kidd, his experience will help that team exponentially. I think it'll be with Kristaps Porzingis. I think that's where that move will really help that organization.
Yeah, and another head coaching person who's been involved in some of these head coaching discussions is Becky Hammon. She comes from the Greg Popovich tree. She's very well regarded, but we keep hearing her name as kind of finalist for some of these jobs. But at the same time, I'm wondering if this is just a token like Rooney ruling in the NFL, where she's just getting token interviews and not really given a shot. Do you think that she will become a head coach and win? And do you think that, and I know that this is a loaded question where they would say, oh, well, is the league ready for it? Well, I don't think the league has to be ready, but do you think that she will get a job?
Yes, I think she will get a job. I don't think it's with any of these teams that are looking to hire coaches. I think that she will ultimately become the next head coach of the San Antonio Spurs whenever Greg Popovich retires.
So do you think that that's the best scenario for her? Because it's one of those things, right? Like when you look at, for instance, Byron Scott, right? He's taken jobs when he was getting head coaching jobs that you couldn't, that weren't built for success. Like you knew that he was going to be the coach in between the coach because of the way the roster was constructed and all that stuff. But do you think that she needs to be specifically strategic in the job that she does take if she's offered one?
I'll make it simpler for you. I remember my first NBA All-Star weekend. It was in 2014. And at the time, I was at a magazine that would not pay for me to go. I was credentialed, and I had to find a way to get out there. Crowdfunded, and some of my friends shared a hotel. First hotel we stayed at, it was at, I think, a DoubleTree. You know, when you walk in a DoubleTree, they give you those cookies that are just
they give you the good cookies.
Exactly, right? So my buddies that were with me in the hotel, this hotel is whack. Let's go to the Marriott because that's where all the players are staying at. So I made a call, had somebody, book a hotel, and the hotel, we were on the 13th or the 14th floor, and we had to put a card against the scanner in the elevator to go past the 12th floor, right? And you had some, it was like executive suites. It was smaller than the other hotel, and it was less personable. And one of my homies said to me at the time, I told you we should have stayed at the other hotel. We got free cookies every night. The people at the desk knew who we were, and we knew everybody on our floor. We should have stayed at the DoubleTree instead of the Marriott. And he was right. How does this apply to your question about Becky Hammon? It's like the TV show Cheers. You want to go where everybody knows your name. sometimes it's not always best to go to new organizations that you have no familiarity with. She knows the ins and outs of the San Antonio Spurs system. She knows R.C. Buford, who's in the front office. She knows Greg Popovich. She has the relationships with the Spurs organization and their legends, well, albeit Tim Duncan, David Robinson, A.B. Johnson, Sean Elliott, and all those other guys. I think she should stay at the DoubleTree instead of the Marriott. What do you think?
I think that it's reasonable. But then my next question for you, and you guys were on with Brandon Scoop B. Robinson, NBA writer and insider for Bally Sports. So I agree with that sentiment because I do believe it gives her an optimal chance to be successful. But then my next question is, when does Greg Popovich retire?
When Greg Popovich wants to retire. I can't speak for Coach Pop, but what I'll say to you is this. The reason why I think it makes sense for Greg to pass the baton on to Becky Hammon is simply for this reason. The San Antonio Spurs, like the Sacramento Kings, have always been ahead of the curve when it relates to things that are different than the status quo. If you remember, in the 2000s, the Spurs brought international talent like Fabricio Uberto.
Yeah.
You brought in Tony Parker. You brought in as they called him before he got the name Manu, Emmanuel Ginobili, before they called him Ginobili.
Yeah.
You had Thiago Splitier. You had all these different players that just came in and dominated the space. They were one of the teams that had the most international players. I mean, technically, Tim Duncan was from the U.S. Virgin Islands. So, they were always ahead of the curve as it relates to, bringing in international talent. And I think in a world today where Me Too, in a world today where gender equality, in a world today where Black Lives Matter, I think this would be a seminal moment where once Pop does retire, you do pass the baton on to Becky Hammon. I think there was a consensus amongst many that, when Pop retired, that Tim Duncan would kind of assume that role. I am probably one of the few that maybe more as the time goes on that believes that Becky Hammon fills that role. I mean, she also, was the first woman coach to help or to guide a Summer League San Antonio Spurs team to a Summer League championship. I mean, I think she's exemplified it. I remember being at Madison Square Garden some years ago, I think 2015, the summer 2015, when Becky Hammon was inducted into the New York Liberty's Ring of Honor, and how excited she was for that. And it took some time to really gauge her interest in the future and just what she wanted to do. I think that she's respected not just amongst WNBA players, but amongst NBA players at large. Nancy Lieberman has always, a colleague of mine at Bally Sports, has always spoke highly of the folks like Becky Hammon. I know Cappy Pondexter, one of the top players in the WNBA history, thinks the world of her. But Danny Green, currently at the Sixers, thinks highly of Becky Hammon. Dwight Howard, a myriad of other people. So I think that Becky Hammon, just like Dawn Staley, just like Teresa Weatherspoon, are the future of the WNBA and the NBA.
On with Brandon Scoop B. Robinson. Find him on Twitter at Scoop B, NBA writer and insider for Bally Sports. Scoop, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Brother, thank you